Welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to clean and maintain the most iconic .22 in America, the Marlin Model 39A lever action, the gun that made Annie Oakley famous. Stay tuned. The Marlin 39A is, to my mind, and to many people, truly a gun without peer. Here's a gun that embodies just about everything that a gun should have. Beautiful design, fabulous workmanship and craftsmanship. It'll handle short, long, and long rifles easily and interchangeably. It has a long, accurate barrel, micro-grooved. The stock is beautiful. It's in this particular case here, it's got the historic Marlin diamond checkering. Let me say something about that. A lot of people think that this was some sort of aberration that was added on in latter-day Marlin history, and that's far from the truth. If you research old Marlin catalogs back to the beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 19th century, you'll find catalog offerings for optional diamond checkering, just like this. This is their high-grade checkering that they would have offered many years ago, and which simply became unavailable for so many years that people thought that plain walnut was the way that Marlin made their firearms. But this would have been their absolute top draw offering back a century ago. The gun has got a takedown action. It can be broken down into two pieces for travel and for easy cleaning of the internal mechanism. The fit and finish on this gun is really beautiful. The wood to metal finish is tight. It's perfect, and the checkering is probably machine checkering, but what a job they do. There's no overruns. There's no chips. The stock is semi-satin finish that's nice. The bluing has got a high luster, both on the barrel and receiver. The traditional black matte finish. This one here sports a Skinner peep sight, which I replaced in favor of the normally installed open rear sight. And in place of the open rear sight, I installed a marble. It's a decorative barrel blank, a very inexpensive addition, but it really makes the gun stand out. And these Skinner sights, although they're not micro adjustable because they rely on 180-degree turns of the aperture, they can certainly dial in terrific accuracy. As you note, this particular model has got the crossbolt safety, which some people find distasteful. It doesn't have to be used. It doesn't have to get in the way. It's a feature which was called upon by unfortunately our litigious society, which requires that companies protect themselves from being sued out of business. Somebody buys a gun and they shoot themselves in the foot, and then they blame the company for not having a correct safety. So these crossbolt safeties were installed in order to protect the company, and you can't blame them. The one thing I should say about these safeties is if you're a person who is not accustomed to having a crossbolt safety, they can be quite an embarrassment if you try to fire the gun with it on, because it will certainly drop the hammer, but the hammer won't go any farther than the crossbolt. Just one other historical note about Marlins is that since 1968 Gun Control Act, serial numbers had to be affixed to the permanent part of the receiver mechanism, so therefore they moved it from the under tang on virtually all their models to the upper tang, where it's the actual receiver rather than the trigger mechanism. So I think I've said enough about the gun. And this is, by the way, also a tubular feed system, and tubular feed is one of the things that makes it easy to handle short, long, and long rifles interchangeably without a stacked magazine. So again, we're going to show you just in a second what you need to clean this gun and to maintain it. Now, if you've seen some of my other cleaning videos, some of this equipment will be very familiar to you. There are a couple of things extra that are worth noting. First of all, you start out with a very high-grade cleaning rod. This is an absolute must. It has to have a ball-bearing handle. so that the shaft can spin without impedance. It has to be able to follow the rifling. You can't use a cleaning rod that will not follow the rifling, otherwise you're going to be defeating yourself. It'll be skipping the brush, and the patch will be skipping over the rifling and missing all the grooves. So it has to have a ball bearing handle. These are expensive rods, but they're well worth it. They're plastic coated. This particular rod happens to be a quite old Parker Hale that I picked up in the 70s. They're still in business. The easiest one to get domestically is made by J. Dewey down in Connecticut, and those are widely available. But this has to be a very stiff spring steel rod with plastic coating. I haven't yet examined the carbon fiber rods, and I don't know what they boast, and whether they will adequately protect the rifling. Perhaps they are terrific. I don't know. But for the time being, I like to stick with the plastic-coated spring steel rod. And on the other end, this feature here is this has a male ferrule, and that male ferrule will allow this rod to accept any diameter or pitch cleaning apparatus, brushes and cleaning tips, jags and whatnot, with the addition of one of the company's simple adapters. And that adapter, by the way, you can get these adapters from Dewey as well. They make life much easier because most companies that make inexpensive rods make proprietary thread pitch and diameter, which means that you have to buy all their tips. Anyway, the next thing we have to have is just have some good quality cleaning towels. I like to use the rags in a box that Scott makes and sells at they sell at Sam's. Have a good piece of padding material. Now it could be simply an old piece of rug, or in this case I just used you can use a piece of towel, whatever it is. But you'll need to have that as a cushion. A nice soft cleaning surface, something to put your gun on. I recommend having a hardwood wedge. This is the same type of wedge that I learned to use 40 years ago at the Smith & Wesson Armorers School for moving cylinders around to adjust cylinders. But this particular wedge is very, very handy when you're working on a Marlin 39A, and I'll show you why. It's nice to have a bore light. We may not use it today, but it's nice to examine the bore and see what's going on inside. And these bore lights are very inexpensive. You can buy these cheaply at any gun store or Cabela's or whatever, and have a 3/32 drift pin. 3/32 drift pin will allow you to perform an operation that's absolutely necessary with the when you're cleaning a Marlin correctly. Have a nice bladed screwdriver with a fairly small tip. This one here is probably about a 1/4 inch wide. This is a 22 swab, cotton swab, and these are very, very handy for saturating the bore to prepare the bore for cleaning with a bristle brush. Then we have the standard 22 diameter cleaning brush, and they have to be bronze bristle. Bronze bristle bore brush is the only way to go. Stay away from steel brushes, especially with 22s. 22s very often times use a milder steel than they use in their high power rifles, and you'll scratch any bore with a steel bristle brush, but most certainly you can do some serious damage with a 22. Bronze is the way to go. Nylon doesn't really do much. It's just simply not aggressive enough, and it's not fine enough to get into the grooves. And you know, don't clean these with a brake cleaner or anything like that, carburetor cleaner, because that stuff will dissolve these bristles. You know, you buy a bristle brush, you spray it with one of those things, and then your brush simply disappears on you. Next thing, it's a must, is a nice close-fitting jag. Now these jags come in each of the calibers that they're intended to clean. This one happens to be 22 diameter, and they should have a sharp pointed tip. That's essential for keeping the patch from wandering off the end of the rod and slipping. And you'll notice that when you clean a 22, if you're using the same diameter instruments for 22 rimfire as you do for, say, your 223 Remington or whatever, you're going to notice that the brush, you're going to think that the brush is much tighter, and the cleaning tip with a patch is much tighter. And that's true. It will be much tighter because the bore diameter of a 22 rimfire is 222, and the bore diameter of a centerfire 22 is 224. So there's a distinct difference in those thousandths of an inch that will make it feel a little tighter. If you're cleaning jag, all the more reason you've got to be very certain that your cleaning jag is appropriately sized for your bore, because you'll never want to get that stuck. It can be almost impossible to remove it without doing damage to your barrel. Now you should have some good quality cotton flannel cleaning patches. You can make fabulous 22 caliber cleaning patches if you have 38 caliber or 9mm cleaning patches. You can cut those into quarters, and they make dandy 22 patches. Here's an example right here. It saves you a little bit of money. Rather than buying all different sizes, you can simply take this size here, and let's see if we measure this. These happen to be inch and a half, roughly inch and 3/4 diameter patches. So that gives you the 4 of the patches that you'll need very easily. Just cut them with the scissors. And a M16 cleaning brush. It's a simple. It's like a toothbrush. These last a lot longer than a toothbrush, though. The bristles are just different fabrication, and they don't flare out on you and get destroyed. Just go to your garage, local garage, and ask them for a squirt of grease. It doesn't make any difference what kind of grease you have. This just is something I squirted out of the grease gun that I use for my tractor. That's all you need. There's nothing special about it. It doesn't have to be any special grade. You don't have to buy gun grease. You don't have to go out and spend a fortune. If you have a local garage, just bring a cup like this and have them squirt just one squirt into it, and you'll have a lifetime supply for what you're going to need. A nice silicone rag. Silicone rag is the best way to protect the finish of the outside of the gun. I use Hoppy's number 9. Hoppy's number 9 is my preferred solvent, simply because I love the way it smells. It absolutely cleans out all the fouling necessary, and I don't use the copper. I don't use the copper detergent. The copper cutter cleaners are absolutely not necessary, and I do not recommend them. In fact, I highly recommend that anybody stay away from them, because they are highly caustic. They remove copper because the substances in them attack copper. What attacks copper will attack steel. Virtually all of them warn and recommend that you do not leave them in contact with the bore for extended periods. Well, if you can't leave them in the bore for extended periods, there's a reason for that. It's because they're doing damage. And chemicals begin to do damage from the instant that they're in contact with the metal. The particular solvent I use is the 2 different grades of Hoppy's, at least 2 different grades. You want to use just the one with the orange band and the yellow label. And if you like outers or anything like that, Ballistol I have a problem with because it's so oily. It gets oil all over everything, and then you're left with an oily mess. So I really, as nice as it is, and as nice a job as it does in cleaning, it just leaves oil all over the place. I think that's it. Oh, and just some plain simple mineral oil. You don't even have to buy Hoppy's. If you have mineral oil in your in your medicine cabinet. That's all you need. Just get yourself a little bottle and fill it up, and you'll have more than you need for the rest of your life. So let's get to it. Before we begin, get yourself a quarter. A quarter is the only instrument that you'll use besides your thumb and forefinger for undoing the takedown screw on a Marlin 39A. I've seen an awful lot of unfortunate cases where people have used apparently pliers or vice grips on that screw, or they've used a screwdriver on the slot. That slot was made, it's dished for one of these. If you use anything else, you're going to cause problems with the gun. Please do yourself a favor and preserve your gun by keeping one of these handy when you clean it. The first thing we're going to do is right here, just with the takedown screw, loosen it, and again, try it first with your fingers. If it doesn't loosen with your fingers, take your quarter and back it off. Now, when you back off these screws, hold on to parts, because older ones, older 39As can easily fall apart and cause serious damage if they just come apart clumsily. Now, these are rebated threads. In other words, the thread does not have to come all the way out of the gun. You don't have to unscrew this from the receiver. Just once it's free of the left side of the receiver, then that's as far as you need to go. Don't keep on backing it out. And that's true also with other firearms, such as the 1022 Ruger. That has a rebated thread. So again, just back it out sufficiently to release it from the other side, and that's all you do. Now the next thing you do is hold the fore end with your left hand firmly, and maintain a grip on just as you would getting ready to fire it. Extend it with the tip of the barrel, either on a padded surface or a carpeted floor. I like to use a rolled up towel, and if you watch now, I'm just going to simply smartly strike. You don't want to strike that magazine tube. Be sure you don't strike the magazine tube. Just the side of the barrel at the fore end. Just smartly strike, and that will the two parts. There you go. These are very tightly fit. These are very, very tightly fit, and they will resist simply opening them up with hand pressure. So you just give them a light wrap on the bench, and that's all you need. We'll put the stock down for the time being, and we'll just take this part, and we'll first remove the magazine tube. You don't need to have that in there. Wipe the magazine tube down, and make sure that this can collect dirt on the outside and be abrasive. So simply wipe it down with a clean towel, and check the plunger. Make sure that the plunger doesn't feel gritty, and make sure it's moving freely. And then afterwards, just take a daub, just a simple daub of that grease. After you've wiped it down. When I say a daub, I'm only talking about that amount right there, and then just simply wipe this with your fingers on the magazine tube. And this is not to create lubricity. As a matter of fact, it can actually make a little bit of beneficial friction, because that way the magazine tube doesn't frustrate you by sliding into the tube. So now, and it also provides some water resistance. Water now will not travel if you're out in rainy weather. That water will not travel and migrate down this tube and get into your gun and cause rust. So that's one of the things that you should do with any tubular feed gun. And when you put that in, you'll notice that it's perhaps a little bit stickier feeling than it was when it was just metal on metal, and that's what you want. Okay, so we'll leave the tube out for the time being. We don't need that. Put that down in a clean location. Take your wooden wedge and sit it behind the receiver. This gives you a good work surface that will prop it toward you. Once you've done that, just simply place your thumb on the bolt and draw it to the rear all the way until it stops, and then lift it straight out. That's all you do. In order to replace it, just watch for these this protrusion right here. That has to be in front of this protrusion on the receiver. So make sure you drop that in place right there, and then just simply slide it forward, and that's how the bolt is removed. Now I'm going to caution you about something. All these parts are extremely sharp. When I say extremely sharp, I mean they're sharp as a straight razor. And any contact with that with your skin, you're gonna be corroding that gun with your own fine blood. So be very careful. You can use. I recommend that you use gloves the first couple of times you deal with this gun. The reason why it's sharp is because these parts are designed to be flush when they're put back together, and to have a hairline crack. So it's done that way for a reason, and it's the same sort of finish that you'll find on other guns such as Smith & Wesson revolvers. All right, now before you go any farther, before we can clean this gun, we have to get this ejector out of the way. This ejector has to be down and locked in place during cleaning, and then it has to be released before you fire it. If you don't release it before you fire it, I have seen reviews where people have given this gun 1 star because it won't eject. I can tell you that the reason it won't eject is somebody locked this ejector down into place and didn't release it. So, or maybe they thought that it was a loose part, and they put that screw down. It has to be loose. If it's not loose, it won't shoot. But this is where you take your 3/32 drift pin, and you place it on top of the hump. There's a hump right there in the forward third. Press it all the way down and turn that screw to the 11 o'clock position. 11 or 12 o'clock position. You want to lock that ejector down, and that way there you won't catch it with your patches and your brush and wipe it out. That's put there specifically for the purpose of cleaning the gun. Now, if you don't have a piece of machinery like this, if you don't have a 40-pound machinist vise, run right out and get one. That should be first on your list before you buy yourself another gun. This is the best gun cradle that you can possibly have. It'll outperform any gun cradle made, and you can use it on handguns, rifles, AR-15s. You can use it on anything you want. It's sturdy. It absolutely will not budge. I can grab this barrel and I can carry the bench around, and that barrel is not going to move and scuff it. Now, that's another thing, is you want to make sure you make yourself a set of wooden pads. These are simply fashioned from 3/8 inch plywood, and 3/8 inch plywood actually will give it a little bit firmer contact than 3/4 inch plywood that continues to crush. But and keep these only for gun use. You don't want to ever use these for other projects, because you're going to end up getting some sort of particles in there that's going to ruin the finish on your guns. And these just simply sit down over the main shaft. We want to take the receiver and mount the receiver so that it's to the right of the vise and with the barrel upside down, with the magazine facing up. And this will allow us to have access to the receiver. Wind it in tightly at the same level as those. Make sure that magazine tube is not being contacted. Make sure it's straight up, and make sure that the jaws of the vise are right in line with the barrel. You don't want to be high or low, because that means the barrel is going to slip, and when it bangs down on that pipe clamp down inside that vise, it will do one nasty job on your gun. Wind it in tight. When I say wind it in tight, you can reef that thing home, and it's not going to damage that barrel in the least. But what's happening now is that barrel absolutely will not slip and will not scuff the bluing. Now place your cotton swab on the rod and then fill it with some solvent. Let me turn it around here so you can see what I'm doing. I like to use these little bottles that you can buy or you can save from other there's other lubricants. You don't want to have it. You don't want to have it more than you need. Just simply saturate the cotton. You don't want to be dripping fluid all over the place. Shake off any excess before you begin. That'll help. And carefully place it inside. Place it inside the bore, inside the chamber, and you have to be below this protrusion right here in the receiver. Otherwise, you're going to get hung up and ruin your rod. That's sharp. And then just simply guide it forward. No bore guide is necessary, certainly. There's nothing here to concern yourself with. Run that wet swab in and out once or twice. And then we're going to simply replace that with our brush. Always keep your cleaning rod wiped off. It's not a bad idea to squirt a little bit of solvent on the brush bristles, and again shake off the excess. Run that through. Wipe your rod down on each pass, and that'll help prevent dirt from getting back in the bore. Now, all that's really necessary for a 22 rimfire is a few passes, maybe 10 passes back and forth. 22s do not pick up any lead fouling. 22 shells, the bullets are all coated with either a hard wax, like a carnauba wax, or some sort of grease, some proprietary compound that the manufacturer uses. And those compounds will absolutely protect the bore from any kind of fouling whatsoever. The only fouling that you're going to get is simply carbon fouling and from burned powder, and also from primer residue. Now, primer residue especially can be somewhat abrasive, but you want to have all that stuff cleaned out on a regular basis. Now, I can also mention, some people will say, well, it's sufficient to use a bore snake. Well, a bore snake is a nice thing to have in the field to do occasional cleaning, but a bore snake will certainly not be aggressive enough to clean a gun out completely. Now I'll place my cleaning jag on the adapter. Make sure it's on snug. Always be very careful that tips stay on during the cleaning process, because if the tip should fall off in the bore, especially cleaning jag, make sure that you don't have that happen, because that's an extremely bad situation. Put your patch right on the tip, and you can stab that patch right on. And again, be very careful with your hands. Don't get your hands in contact with those sharp surfaces, and just run this patch right on through. And this patch here, as you can see, this gun has fired several hundred rounds, and the patch is quite dark. But we're gonna run through about, I would say, about maybe 3 or 4 patches should probably clean it. You can saturate them en masse and block like your Garand, just do them all at once. And present the patch with the fuzzy side to the bore. And if you and that's something else. If you should ever have the misfortune of cutting yourself with a gun part, take care of yourself first, your own first aid. But get back to that gun and get that blood off with some fresh water right away. Make sure it's all off, because I've seen guns that have been on deer hunts, and the gun suffered some severe damage because somebody allowed their bloody hands from cleaning and dressing a deer to get onto the gun, and that'll cause no end of destruction. Well, I think I've got a virtually clean bore now. We'll go one more patch. Okay, that patch dropped out clean. You can take my word for it. Just as the same color out as it came in. Now, with a dry, clean patch, run that down through. And you can see why it's necessary to have a sharp tip on that cleaning jag. You'd never be able to position that patch. And that's all you need to have, is just one dry patch, and that'll take care of whatever solvent is in that bore. Now, I prefer to place a this is a blued steel gun, so what I would do is to always follow up with a couple of drops of oil, and all that's necessary is just one. You want to put 1, 2, 3, 4 drops of oil is all that's necessary on that patch. You don't want to saturate the patch. It's absolutely not necessary. The only thing you're looking to do is to coat the inside of that bore with a fine coat of oil. Less is more. You never want to introduce lots of oil to a gun barrel, because you're going to have a obstruction of the bore, and you're going to have an over lubricated chamber. You don't want to have a chamber that has any oil residue in it when you're firing, because you won't have a good gas seal with the cartridge case. The function of the cartridge case, besides simply holding the powder and bullet and primer, is to seal the chamber so that all propelled gases and pressure is forward and toward the bullet and not toward the shooter. That was the advancement that made high velocity possible from black powder days. It was not so much. It was in combination with the smokeless powder, but it was more than that. It was the ability to keep those gases, the gas pressure, in this direction, going this way. You don't want to have any gases coming back toward your face. So one of the things that's very important to do is to make sure that you have a good seal. That good seal can be corrupted by having oil in your chamber, and that's why I vehemently oppose the use of any oils in guns, because oil will always migrate to two places. It migrates to the wood and destroys the wood, and it migrates to the chamber and can destroy the gun. Or it can make for pore extraction and whole numbers of other problems. You know, these guns they're not made to be lubricated. They're not an internal combustion engine. There's nothing in this gun that desires mechanical flowing of oil, and to place oil in this gun is not recommended by anybody, and it's certainly not needed. There are many different proprietary oils being marketed out there, and some of them are being marketed by firearms manufacturers themselves. I'll state specifically, for instance, REM oil. REM oil is simply a compound that's essentially a mineral spirits, like a painter uses, with a few other toxic additives that is highly toxic. They use it as a combination cleaner and lubricant. I don't believe in combinations. I believe in using just a solvent for a solvent and use oil for oil. They only say to put 1 drop here, 1 drop there, and that's it. They don't recommend anything more than. Now, after cleaning the barrel side of the receiver and the barrel, there's a couple of things that we can note here. This is where another place where the grease comes in. Right here, this is the carrier. This is the lifter that lifts the cartridges into position with the finger lever. When that is under stress, this pin right here, this pin on the carrier, this lifter, there's a lot of friction on that interaction between the finger lever and that pin, and there's also some considerable friction on the downstroke against this larger, although it's not nearly as much, on this larger button. Now, it's a good idea to just simply wipe those parts off. You can use, this is where you can take some solvent and some hoppies. I'm not going to trouble you and belay the issue, but you can do the obvious. You can just simply wipe those parts off and get them clean. You don't have to take anything apart unless you have a remarkably dirty gun. You can remove the finger lever, and you can take the carrier off, and you can clean those parts out. But usually it's sufficient just to get it out of the way and to simply clean things out with some hoppies, some solvent, and a rag, and a soft cloth. And then when you're all done, get this end of it, and when you're all done, simply take a just a small amount of take a small amount of oil, less than a 1/16 of a teaspoon, not even that, just a dot, and place that on the button at this point and underneath the finger lever shaft, and place it on this. Again, stay away from the sharp parts, and put it on this part of this actuator here. And that's all you need to do. Don't get obsessive compulsive about the grease and slather it on. Grease is remarkably efficient. It will stay in place. The reason why grease exists in the world is because it's essentially oil which has had some agents added to it that make it stiff, so that it stays in place and doesn't run. And that's why you use grease here and not oil, because this is open grain, and this open grain will readily attract oil. And if you put a drop of oil there, that oil will go right into the stock and will start corrupting that stock. And that's why you see so many lever actions on the market, and so many shotguns on the market that have got cracks right here in this part of the tang, because saturation of oil over the years, and it doesn't take very long, will saturate that wood stock and will crack that, and now you've got irreparable damage. Now, one place that you should place just one drop of oil. That's all that you should use, is one drop of oil right here on this finger lever screw. When I say one drop, I mean one drop. 2 is not good. 3 is worse. 1 drop is sufficient. That's all you need to have good cycling in that part. Work it in, and then daub off any excess. And take, if you have any Q-tips, you never want to see standing oil in a gun. If you have standing oil, that won't stand there forever. That's going to, during vibration of firing and actuating the gun, that's going to eventually find its way to wood. So clean off any excess oil with a Q-tip, and you're ready to put it back together. Now, one note about that finger lever. This is not that it wiggles from side to side is a design feature, and that does not mean that the gun is defective or loose. There's too many times people worry about looseness in gun parts. Looseness is a design feature in so many guns in certain parts, and it was intended that way for many reasons. So you don't want to have the gun bind up by adding any kind of washers or anything like that to prevent that wiggling. Let's get it back together. Now, reposition your wedge. The reason I use a wedge, I like to use a wedge is, first of all, I've got one, and when I have something, I like to use it. But that that makes that receiver sit still so that it doesn't roll around on the round stock. And anytime something is still, it means that it's not going to break or get distorted. First thing we do is to release that ejector. The ejector, you depress it first with your, control it first with your drift pin, turn back the screw out to the 9 o'clock position so that it comes up through that notch. And you can see a notch in that screw, and make sure it's just working normally. That's it. Now we can put it back together with the bolt in. The bolt, you notice it has a taper here that fits on the back taper of the receiver, and the front section is rounded that fits into this section of the receiver. It has to go in flat. So first of all, with that tab, again with that small tab in front of the protrusion on the receiver, right there, press it down with your thumb and carefully push it down. You're going to have to press down with your thumb right there at the beginning of that, at the beginning of the bolt. Keep your thumb right there and press forward and guide it right into position. Push it right down and over. Don't allow it to ride up, and then press it right into the forward part of the receiver. It'll lock right into place. And if you need to wear gloves, wear them, because again, this is a very it's a very sharp bunch of parts. Okay. The receiver, you'll notice that the receiver has got there's a small little tang right here, a small little protrusion below this rounded crescent. You want to get that tab inside. There's a recess that's right underneath here. There's a slot right underneath here. You want to get that underneath that recess and make sure everything is straight and flat, and just simply bring the receiver up into place. That's all you do. And once it's pressed into place, you can turn your thumb screw, and that's it. Now wind that into place with your quarter, and that will draw the two parts together. If you can see your two parts right here, they're going to draw together. And if need be, you can assist that process if your gun is brand new and if the parts is very tight. You can reverse the procedure that I showed you earlier and place the front of your muzzle on a padded surface and use that as a fulcrum and push it into place. So all I'm doing is simply turning that thumb screw with my quarter until what I'm going to look for now is that these surfaces right here, there's you can see right down near the trigger and up here by the safety, there's places right there where there should be a hairline crack, barely visible crack. That's what you're looking for. Now take your silicone cloth and finish up the process. And I actually make my own. I have silicone cloths everywhere where I may be handling guns, but I actually make my own by taking simple cotton flannel that you can get at a yard goods store. And when I say cotton flannel, don't use any synthetics, nylon or anything like that. Just go to the local yard goods store and get yourself a yard of cotton flannel, and you can cut it into 18 or 20 inch squares. And if you cut it with pinking shears, if your grandmother or your mother has any, or your wife has any pinking shears, that cuts a ragged edge so that it won't unravel and have threads all over the place. But or perhaps the yard goods store clerk has them there and she'll do it for you. But just simply take that rag, spread it out, squirt half an ounce of simple mineral oil on it, just plain drugstore pharmaceutical USP mineral oil. Squirt it all over. It doesn't have to be silicone. And then just fold it up and then wring it. Just wring it like you wring a bathing suit or a towel, and put it in a plastic bag, and you've got yourself a beautiful lightly oiled gun rag. So that's it. It's a beautiful gun. It's clean and it'll shoot. God bless.